Hi everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. My name is Yuyutsu, and I'm very excited to talk about Spirit Reforged's first major update, the Sunscorched update. Our new update is out now on the tmodloader Steam Workshop and mod browser for you to enjoy. We hope you've been enjoying Sunscorched in the last month, and, of course, the elephant in the room. There are 3 key content areas in our latest update I'll be covering today: Scarabeus, our desert expansion, and the brand new ecotone that we kept secret until our release. Let's explore these content additions together. Let's begin with Spirit Reforged's first boss, Scarabeus. Scarabeus? Which one do you say? Let us know in the comments below. We've been working on Scarabeus for a long time. After all, Scarabeus has a long history of designs and concepts that we wanted to be perfect before putting the boss to paper. The purple and gold bug you know and love is about 10 years old. In Spirit Classic, Scarabeus started out as a simple, grounded beetle boss that was generally unremarkable. Around 2019, we incorporated a second phase where the boss takes flight, which has been a mainstay in every iteration of Scarabeus since. Scarabeus in Spirit Classic was also our most up-to-date boss yet. Our programmer, Zoroark City, had spent a long time polishing the fight. Along with the resprite, this iteration of Scarabeus was the centerpiece of the classic Sinister Sands update, and it was well received. During the entirety of Scarabeus' development in Reforged, it was important for us to take this existing quality standard and elevate it even further. We also felt a lot of pressure to make sure our first ever boss was a hit. In the years between Classic and Reforged, we explored tons of iterations of Scarabeus' design. If you didn't know, Classic's most recent Scarabeus was based on a type of creature in World of Warcraft known as the Ukir. For a while, we stuck with this aggressive, spiky sort of design. Some designs were weightier and some more classically Egyptian, but we weren't happy with the general direction of Scarabeus for a while. Eventually, we agreed it would be more interesting for the design to take more inspiration from real-life scarabs and beetles instead of the more generic bug monster direction. IbanPlay made a few drafts trying to hone in on more distinct scarab features, before ending with the iridescent blue design, multiple corona-shaped spikes, and a firefly-esque abdomen for a sun motif. The team was excited about this design, but it still did take us a while to finalize the in-game sprite using this iteration though. We spent time ironing out small details like the size of the head, the shape of the eyes and legs, and the balance between cuteness and seriousness. Once we had our final sprite down, we began the long process of Scarabeus' animation and implementation. We've learned a lot from our months working in Scarabeus, and there's no one better to walk you through it than our lead animator and one of the key developers on Scarabeus' fight design and implementation, Lunatix. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hello, I'm Lunatix, the primary animator for Team Spirit. For Sunscorched, I animated Scarabeus, had lots to say about how those animations should be implemented, and did a fair share of quality assurance. I don't think I can describe it in any other way. It was a fever dream. I think I may have been in a fugue state for the past 7 or so months. Nonetheless, I have plenty of beetle animations to show for it all, and would love a chance to share a bit of behind the scenes for you guys. During the development process for Scarabeus, most of the animations ended up informing the attacks you see in-game. This led to mismatch when it came time for implementation, leading to my animations being used in interesting ways we didn't originally intend for, one of them being the swipe. Back when animation started, I had this moveset doc to refer to. For basic behaviors like the swipe, I would read, mangle the poor bug, and send several rough movement mockups for the team to choose from. The reason I highlight the swipe is because during every step of this process, this animation seemed to run into hiccups. The first hiccup was realizing that the front legs didn't match Iban's original design. After meticulously repolishing the front legs for both the crawl and swipe, the animation laid in stasis until it came time to start implementation. On the moveset doc, it said that the swipe would be used if the player remains close to Scarabeus for several seconds. In practice, Scarabeus would have to keep distance with the player in order to set up its other attacks, while the animation itself didn't provide the attack enough reach to threaten players in the rare moments it would even trigger. Combine that with us wanting to carry over the boss taking knockback from Classic, there was just no place for the swipe. There were further attempts to buff the attack, like increasing the distance from the player it could trigger and making Scarab lunge at the player as it attacks, but these ran into their own problems. What a shame. It looked like this move, along with the animation I made for it, would have to be scrapped. Until Iban did a full lookover on Scarabeus' moveset and repurposed the swipe into the end part of the current dig attack, instead of keeping it standalone. To put things in perspective, this was a several-month ordeal. Fast forward to today, this animation reimagines Scarabeus' horn as a lightning rod, sending bolts toward the player during the duo battle with the Desert Scourge. I could cry. Ironically, the longest animation in the fight took the least amount of iteration and tweaking, the phase transition. I even took a risk surprising the team with it, fully expecting to see criticism since I purposefully kept progress a secret. But no! I later learned it even informed how Asbubby composed Scarab's Phase 2 theme. Well, this was a fun insight into the winding road Scarab's moveset tended to take from inception to final product. For Team Spirit, this will be best remembered as an example of what not to do when making a boss. While it turned out fine for Scarabeus, another swipe ordeal is something we would like to avoid in the future. The key takeaways are, first, when designing a boss, before fully committing to any animation, make sure the boss's moveset has been fully designed and triple check that no attack would end up useless on its own, or have poor cohesion with the rest of the boss's kit. Rough placeholders make it easy to test this in-game. Secondly, everyone at some point comes up with a behavior a boss would look really cool doing. But when you do, remember, bosses should be designed around what the player is doing in response to the boss. What gear does the player have access to? God forbid, will they just run away? And finally, don't be afraid just to let go of animations or attacks, even if they are finalized. There might be times where an attack you thought would work fine ends up turning out poorly. And while it's true we tried salvaging the swipe for a good while, it becoming a bottleneck for release was never something Team Spirit would allow to happen.
Thank you so much, Lunatix. Lunatix is absolutely right. We learned so much from our first modern foray into boss design. We hope to smooth out the process and align our art and programmatic visions in the future so we can continue to create and deliver amazing new bosses to you. Let's talk a little bit more about Scarabeus' gameplay though. You'll notice that Scarabeus doesn't always deal contact damage. While contact damage is a common theme among Terraria bosses, it enforces a particularly negative mindset for players, telling them to stay away. Getting up close with melee becomes a more punishing task than it should be, and it's very easy to build and create distance in Terraria instead of directly engaging with the boss. We hoped that by making clearly telegraphed damage windows with a typically non-damaging hitbox, players would feel more encouraged to get up close. But, of course, that's only half the battle. Sure, we've made it easier for players to approach Scarabeus, but what if they just keep running away anyway? We needed to find ways to keep players close. The various shockwave attacks throughout the fight punish players from simply running away by either growing in size as they travel, or by forcing players into close quarters safe spaces near the boss itself. The roll dash matches the distance and velocity of the player, so it can always catch up with you. And, alongside the dig attack to quickly reposition the boss, Scarabeus can never be outrun. Another thing that we wanted to avoid that's common in Terraria boss fights is minions overlapping with the core boss's attack pattern. We weren't interested in throwing Servants of Cthulhu-like minions at the player on top of Scarabeus' fine-tuned attack pattern. Still, Scarabeus needed its servants, as they were so thematically tied into the boss's many iterations and designs. So, the minions became flavorful visuals for the boss's intro, and the swarm attack was made to use newly hatched antlions that get burnt up by Scarabeus' blazing abdomen. Originally, this attack was gonna simply attract mini scarabs, but we decided it would be more thematic to use the existing desert bugs, like moths to a flame. The antlions were a neat compromise that strengthened the boss's sun theme, and it made for a lovely spectacle during the swarm attack. Lastly, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about Scarabeus' loot. It was extremely important to the team to create a loot pool for Scarabeus that felt diverse and rewarding. Many boss drops in Spirit Classic and beyond feel like generic, boss-colored items for each class. We got away from this by challenging ourselves. Besides the Serrated Claw Expert drop, we wouldn't allow ourselves to design any primary drops based on Scarabeus itself. We instead decided to draw on different desert motifs to create our gear. A good example of this can be found in the armor set. Initially, as an exception to this rule, we were planning on treading familiar ground and going with a simple, chitin armor like Classic, as fashioning yourself with the scales and the hides of a monster is an established trope and a very cool one at that. But the team didn't just want to settle for that, and we wanted to go above and beyond. And so, after much deliberation, as is fashion for us, and iterating, we ended up going for a Bedouin aesthetic. The art team locked in, everything ran like clockwork, and we ended up with an armor we're very proud of. On top of that, we added some unique aesthetic drops to Scarabeus' loot table to make refighting the boss more exciting. And, of course, Scarab Bombs. It's like they were made for us. Scarabeus is a culmination of months and years of love. It wouldn't be remotely as amazing as it ended up without years of design iteration, months of animation, weeks of implementation and testing, dozens of Easter eggs, a 2-part music theme based on the boss's phase, and your love for Terraria's bestest bug. We hope you've enjoyed fighting Scarabeus, and please look forward to our next boss fight soon. To find your way to Scarabeus, you will need to explore our newest dungeon, the Ziggurat. The Ziggurat is the highlight of our desert expansion in this update. Explore a large dungeon with custom rooms, traps, encounters, and, most importantly, new loot. If you remember in Spirit Classic, the Ziggurat was a tiny structure with no real content. That's changed. We've pulled out all the stops for the Ziggurat this time. The structure has been overhauled entirely, and, unlike Classic, no two are ever the same. But how did we get from this to this? Even though the classic Ziggurat wasn't that notable, we saw a lot of design potential in the concept. Rather than focus on typical ancient Egyptian motifs found in vanilla, we decided for a more Mesopotamian-inspired structure to stand out from the pyramid. Our first step was deciding on the scope of this new Ziggurat. Initially, though we were certain we wanted it to be larger than the single room in Spirit Classic, we weren't sure where to go from there. What was the point of the Ziggurat? How could we justify adding a new triangular dungeon to the desert when the pyramid was also present, even if it looked different? We decided to draw on Classic and tie the new Ziggurat into the spawning of Scarabeus. We now had 2 design goals. 1. Make the Ziggurat a much lengthier, in-depth gameplay experience than any structure we'd made yet. And 2. Ensure that players had a way to spawn Scarabeus after finishing exploring the Ziggurat. Our mock-ups grew larger and larger to accommodate this new dungeon crawl. Eventually, one of our programmers, settled on a system that created a series of floors with semicircle-shaped rooms and joined them together with random tunnels and dead ends. We were very happy with how the system combined random generation, like Terraria's dungeon and Lizard Temple, with our own curated room types. After getting the foundations down, we had to find ways to fill it with engaging content. We went for a room-by-room approach. The team designed different regions of the Ziggurat that you can find and explore, including libraries, tombs, and the central chamber, which is filled with loot. And of course, the Ziggurat experience is elevated by the music by Moonburn. A lot of successful mod development is spontaneous and improvisational too. Along the way, the team threw tons of ideas against the wall and added them to the Ziggurat to help add depth to the structure. With all the space we had in the Ziggurat, an issue we constantly ran into was using that space meaningfully. You can only make sand and sandstone colored content so much before players get bored. Out of the blue, our artist Sabi came up with the design for a deep blue lapis block, which was just what the Ziggurat needed. We've added a colorful lapis furniture set, unique hanging chains and sensors with custom physics, and a sneaky grave-robbing enemy. None of those were set in stone during initial design, which is what makes modding fun. Besides the Ziggurat, we've spent some time adding content to the underground desert. In early game playthroughs, the underground desert can feel oppressive and repetitive, and we've aimed to change that. We designed underground oases to give players a rest while exploring the underground desert. When you're ready, step out of them to encounter new loot in desert cabins, discoveries in amber fossils, and brand new ruins. Now, Let's head back up to the surface to talk about our third and most surprising content addition. In our last deep dive, we shared our idea for a brand new category of biomes, ecotones. We've been thinking about these transitional biomes for over 5 years now, and we're thrilled to see that the concept is well received. With the success of the savanna, we immediately got to work on another desert ecotone in this desert-themed update. We wanted to design a unique environment for the space between the desert and snow biomes. How do you design a bridge between two polar opposites? It's a tough challenge. The two biomes have no greenery, eliminating a lot of potential transitional environments. I decided to look for real-world biomes that could match the colors of the snow and the desert. So, what if we created a biome based on real-life salt flats, where the ground reflected the sky? I drew inspiration from two famous salt flats, the Yuyutsu Salt Flats in Bolivia and the Bonneville Salt Flats in Utah. From the inception of the biome, I knew that it was going to be all about the spectacle of this mirrored world. At the time, I had no idea if the concept was even possible or if it would look good. However, when Sunscorched's development started, our artists now mocked up what the flats would look like and we were hooked. We decided to add the flats to Sunscorched and expand the desert ecosystem even more. Now, you may wonder how we can go from a few lines on a Google Doc to a full-fledged biome. It's a long and rewarding process for sure. Usually, our pipeline goes something like this. We start with the basic idea, then build the foundation, then add the scaffolding, polish it up, take a bird's eye view, and a second pass, then wrap it all up with some quality assurance. Phew. Does that make sense? I'm sorry. Let me try again. You've already heard of the initial idea I pitched, so let's jump forward to the foundation step. This is our initial implementation. One of our talented programmers, created a proof of concept of reflective salts, and we were all blown away. There was something here. Of course, this foundation went through tons of changes until we got it just right. We'll talk about that more later. Once the foundation of the biome was complete, we moved on to the scaffolding. Salt flats are a novel concept, but any biome in Terraria needs a lot more content to be compelling. Salt flats are quite barren, and my initial idea didn't really account for what players would actually engage with while playing. If you're designing a biome, make sure you're offering the player a diversity of experiences. First, we started by fleshing out the flora and fauna of the flats. Flamingos, often found in salty environments in real life, were the first entity we introduced to our concept. It immediately added a second dimension and a second color to the flats. With flamingos, we could now think about related environmental additions like shrimp critters and lakes, both of which we added during development. We also wanted to find unique plants to introduce to the salt flats. Our designer Enowin introduced red saltwort to the flats, which gave more texture to the biome while also reinforcing the pop of color that flamingos added to the flats. As for the trees, we were actually inspired by Terraria's own desert background. This one in particular showcases a desiccated tree that we felt would align perfectly with the flats. We tied these trees to dry wood. That way, we could avoid content bloat and draw links between the two desert ecotones. Environmentally, we decided that we needed to break up the reflective salt plane a little. Our initial implementation created an unbroken bridge of salts, which, though visually remarkable, was monotonous. We also added shallow caves below the flats for players to explore. With that, our foundation was well supported. It was time for a sprinkle of polish. What we had was perfectly serviceable, but I wanted to add even more depth to the salt flats. Even with the new environmental additions, there still wasn't enough loot for players to engage with. And since we wanted the biome to be largely peaceful, it wouldn't be as simple as adding more flora and fauna, which we did with the savanna. So we started playing with some mystical elements. I looked at Tibetan Buddhist tradition to add new pots shaped like stupas, stone ruins, and new chests that look like reliquaries. From there, we leaned in further to a magical purifying element, offering players anti-world evil tools with the Mahakala masks. The reliquaries also served as a perfect spot for flavorful loot like purification powder, flare powder, and the bow staff. We also added wisps, which were the perfect balance between a peaceful critter and a threatening enemy when provoked. Our last bit of polish came from the furniture and ambient tiles we created for the salt flats. While our resident environmental expert Gobi worked on a mix of background objects to scatter across the flats, our artist Sabi went in a brand new brutalist direction for Salt Flats furniture. Stepping away from the mystical and natural themes of the flats allowed Sabi's more modern tiles and furniture to really stand out. We've loved seeing your builds in the Salt Flats, by the way, and we really hope to see more. It sounds like we're almost at the finish line, right? And that's what we thought too. I was actually recording this very script when we decided to compare our in-game Salt Flats and some reference images of the Uyuni Salt Flats. Something was missing. Our reflections were polished and functional, but they didn't capture the jaw-dropping effect that we wanted players to feel. It's really important to zoom out and take a fresh look at everything. So we went in for a second pass and remade our reflection from the ground up. Let's hear what IbanPlay, the developer who worked on the final Salt reflection, has to say.
Problem. How do you make reflections in a 2D game? Simple solution? Just draw everything again, but flipped. Okay, maybe it's not actually as easy as that, but that's the basic idea behind what we're doing. Before the game starts drawing the final image you'll see on your screen, we create a separate blank canvas, then render almost everything on it to obtain a perfect copy of the final image. Getting a canvas with a copy of the final product on hand is a very tedious step, but we can't make reflections just yet. Before that, we have to take a small detour and grab a second blank canvas. On this canvas, we will render only reflective salt tiles alongside a gradient that represents the distance to the salt surface at every given pixel. Now that we have both a copy of the final image and a texture we can use to crop our reflections outside of salt tiles, we can use a simple shader to draw our first canvas reflected inside of the salt tiles. Great! These effects work very well and make for a very pretty reflection on the salt. But when we put it in the salt flats, something feels off. Can you notice it? Yeah, the horizon. The mountain range in the background is reflecting down at the horizon line, which is how it would work in real life, but now that we're mirroring it inside the salt tiles, we end up with 4 mountain ranges. That's not particularly aesthetically pleasant, nor is it realistic, and that sorta became the big problem with salt flats. In terms of solutions that were suggested, we had remove the reflected mountains from the background. This gets us back to 2 mountain ranges, at the cost of not making any physical sense. Always align the horizon line in the background with the salt floor. This gives us 2 mountain ranges without breaking physics, but it removes the sense of vastness from the background and the illusion would immediately break between elevation differences. This is what was attempted for a while, but the edge cases were just too plentiful to make it work, so we ended up sticking with a third option. Don't reflect the background. Well, that takes care of it for sure, but it's just not as cool now. And the insides of salt tiles just looks kinda plain. Okay, now we're super close to our planned release date, and the developers are bringing the background's reflections back up. By looking back at the images we had as references, it was clear that we couldn't have the 4 mountain reflections. But also that it was imperative to capture the expansive background and sky in the reflection. The problem was clear. We simply cannot have 2 separate reflection lines, because it would lead to a flipped horizon. That's where I come in. What if instead of reflecting the background, we simply let it continue through the foreground transparently? It'd be almost as if the background was extending smoothly into the foreground and that the salt surface we stood on simply marked our 3D depth alongside it. This new approach is a few steps more complex than what we had before. You know what that means? Yeah, let's do more stuff on new canvases! Right after the step where we rendered a copy of the final game screen, minus the background, we're gonna need to render a copy of all the objects in the sky on a new canvas. The sun, the moon, the clouds, lanterns, etc. And then use our 4th and final canvas to draw the biome background. To get the clouds reflecting into the large salt plains in the background, we'll use a shader to combine the 3rd and 4th canvases together. Now we are ready to composite our final product together. We'll draw our background canvas containing the sky reflections not flipped, then draw the foreground objects flipped on top. We just need to crop everything outside the salt tiles. Et voila! A reflective biome that doesn't break physics, but retains the vast sky reflections of real-life salt flats. Throw in extra intense blue moonlight that brightens and dims alongside the moon phase, and you've got one of the prettiest looking biomes in T mode. All for the small cost of a lot of sanity lost trying to align horizon lines, and fixing 4K bugs, and missing reflections. and making it work with Zoom, and...
Thanks, Iban. Like Iban said, quality assurance took a long time. Our work is never done, though. As you explore the flats, make sure that you report any issues or suggestions over on our Discord. Your experiences are the final and most important part of designing biomes like this. With the Salt Flats, we're hoping to push the envelope on what Terraria biomes can look and feel like. We hope you spend hours exploring, building, and relaxing in the Salt Flats. Well, there you have it. That covers most of the content in Sunscorched, but not all of it. Get out there and explore what our latest update has to offer for you. We truly hope you enjoy playing this update as much as we've enjoyed working on it. Don't worry though, I've still got more to share. When we released Spirit Reforged last March, we provided a short content timeline for our future updates. Well, we've reached the end of the road, so it's time to plan out our next few updates. Here's what our timeline looks like. We've immediately gotten to work on our next minor update, which will introduce glyphs to Reforged. Glyphs are a system from Spirit Classic that allows you to enchant weapons with unique, powerful effects. Expect new glyphs, overhauled enchantments, and more soon. After glyphs, we'll be bringing you a major update that the team has been itching to work on. We're calling it the Armory Update for now. Here, we'll be adding dozens of new weapons and accessories to the game across all of pre-hard mode. The Armory Update will focus on adding new subclasses and ways to play the game, while giving some much needed love to some of Terraria's forgotten subclasses. Looking at you, boomerangs. Next up, we'll be working to overhaul and bring back another one of Spirit's most beloved bosses, the Moon Jelly Wizard. The Jelly Deluge event and its mischievous boss will make their return soon. And lastly, to round it out, we'll be releasing a small content update that we're calling Sleepover, packed with relaxing content that focuses on towns and NPCs. Past all that, we've got so much more planned, but you'll need to stay tuned for future updates. We've also just reopened our Patreon. Team Spirit is an entirely volunteer-run group, and we truly appreciate having the opportunity to work on this amazing project for you all. Back during Spirit Classic, we had a Patreon, but we decided to put it on hold indefinitely because we felt as though we weren't doing our patrons justice with our pace of development. Well, that's changed entirely. If you'd like to support Spirit Reforged, please feel free to join our Patreon. We look forward to releasing more spoilers and behind-the-scenes content to our patrons. With all that said, I'd like to welcome you to Sunscorched one last time. Make sure to download it on Spirit Reforged's Steam Workshop page linked below. The team and I love making content for you all, and we think you'll enjoy what 2026 has in store. Thank you so much for watching.